Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be continuing with my read aloud for the Twilight saga. This is chapter 9, Theory, and the story is just going to get better from here. So before we begin, I just have to make the disclaimer that I don't own any of the text, any of the characters. The entire concept of Twilight is owned by Stephanie Meyer. So this is just simply a read aloud for entertainment purposes. Don't own anything. Got to make that clear. So this is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, Chapter 9, Theory. Can I ask just one more? I pleaded as Edward accelerated much too quickly down the quiet street. He didn't seem to be paying any attention to the road. He sighed. One, he agreed. His lips pressed together into a cautious line. Well, you said you knew I hadn't gone into the bookstore and that I had gone south. I was just wondering how you knew that. He looked away, deliberating. I thought we were past all the evasiveness, I grumbled. He almost smiled. Fine then, I followed your scent. He looked at the road, giving me time to compose my face. I couldn't think of an acceptable response to that, but I filed it carefully away for future study. I tried to refocus. I wasn't ready to let him be finished, now that he was finally explaining things. And then you didn't answer one of my first questions, I stalled. He looked at me with disapproval. Which one? How does it work? The mind-reading thing. Can you read anybody's mind anywhere? How do you do it? Can the rest of your family... I felt silly asking for clarification on make-believe. There's more than one, he pointed out. That's more than one, he pointed out. I simply intertwined my fingers and gazed at him, waiting. No, it's just me, and I can't hear anyone, anywhere. I have to be fairly close. The more familiar someone's voice is, the farther away I can hear them, but still, no more than a few miles. He paused thoughtfully. It's a little bit like being in a huge hall filled with people, everyone talking at once. It's just a hum, a buzzing of voices in the background, until I focus on one voice and then what they're thinking is clear. Most of the time I tune it all out. It can be very distracting. And then it's easier to seem normal. He frowned as he said the word, when I'm not accidentally answering someone's thoughts rather than their words. Why do you think you can't hear me? I asked curiously. He looked at me, his eyes enigmatic. I don't know, he murmured. The only guess I have is that maybe your mind doesn't work the same way the rest of theirs do. Like your thoughts are on the AM frequency and I'm only getting FM. He grinned at me, suddenly amused. My mind doesn't work right? I'm a freak? The words bothered me more than they should. Probably because his speculation hit home. I'd always suspected as much, and it embarrassed me to have it confirmed. I hear voices in my mind, and you're worried that you're the freak? He laughed. Don't worry, it's just a theory. His face tightened. Which brings us back to you. I sighed. How to begin? Aren't we past all the evasions now? He reminded me softly. I looked away from his face for the first time, trying to find words. I happened to notice the speedometer. Holy crow! I shouted. Slow down! What's wrong? He was startled, but the car didn't decelerate. You're going 100 miles an hour! I was still shouting. I shot a panicky glance out the window, but it was too dark to see much. The road was only visible in the long patch of bluish brightness from the headlights. The forest along both sides of the road was like a black wall, as hard as a wall of steel if we veered off the road at its speed. Relax, Bella. He rolled his eyes, still not slowing. Are you trying to kill us? I demanded. We're not going to crash. I tried to modulate my voice. Why are you in such a hurry? I always drive like this. He turned to smile crookedly at me. Keep your eyes on the road! I've never been in an accident, Bella. I've never even gotten a ticket. He grinned and tapped his forehead. Built-in radar detector. Very funny, I fumed. Charlie's a cop, remember? I was raised to abide by traffic laws. Besides, if you turn us into a Volvo pretzel around a tree trunk, you can probably just walk away. Probably, he agreed with a short, hard laugh. But you can't. He sighed, and I watched with relief as the needle gradually drifted toward 80. Happy? Almost. I hate driving slow, he muttered. This is slow? Enough commentary on my driving, he snapped. I'm still waiting for your latest theory. I bit my lip. He looked down at me, his honey eyes unexpectedly gentle. I won't laugh, he promised. I'm more afraid that you'll be angry with me. Is it that bad? Pretty much, yeah. He waited. I was looking down at my hands, so I couldn't see his expression. Go on. His voice was calm. I don't know how to start, I admitted. Why don't you start at the beginning? You said you didn't come up with this on your own. No. What got you started? A book? A movie? He probed. No, it was Saturday at the beach. I risked a glance up at his face. He looked puzzled. I ran into an old family friend, Jacob Black, I continued. His dad and Charlie have been friends since I was a baby. He still looked confused. His dad is one of the Quileute elders. I watched him carefully. His confused expression froze in place. We went for a walk. I edited all my scheming out of the story, and he was telling me some old legends, trying to scare me, I think. He told me one. I hesitated. Go on, he said, about vampires. I realized I was whispering. I couldn't look at his face now, but I saw his knuckles tighten convulsively on the wheel. And you immediately thought of me? Still calm. No, he mentioned your family. He was silent, staring at the road. I was worried suddenly, worried about protecting Jacob. He just thought it was a silly superstition, I said quickly. He didn't expect me to think anything of it. It didn't seem like enough, I had to confess. It was my fault. I forced him to tell me. Why? Lauren said something about you. She was trying to provoke me, and an older boy from the tribe said your family didn't come to the reservation, only it sounded like he meant something different. So I got Jacob alone and I tricked him out of it, I admitted, hanging my head. He startled me by laughing. I glared up at him. He was laughing, but his eyes were fierce, staring ahead. Tricked him how? He asked. I tried to flirt. It worked better than I thought it would. Disbelief colored my tone as I remembered. I'd like to have seen that, he chuckled darkly. And you accused me of dazzling people. Poor Jacob Black. I blushed and looked out my window into the night. What did you do then? He asked after a minute. I did some research on the internet. And did that convince you? His voice sounded barely interested, but his hands were clamped hard onto the steering wheel. No, nothing fit. Most of it was kind of silly. And then I stopped. What? I decided it didn't matter. I whispered. It didn't matter? His tone made me look up. I had finally broken through his carefully composed mask. His face was incredulous, with just a hint of anger I'd feared. No, I said softly. It doesn't matter to me what you are. A hard, mocking edge enters his voice. You don't care if I'm a monster, if I'm not human. No. He was silent, staring straight ahead again. His face was bleak and cold. You're angry, I sighed. I shouldn't have said anything. No, he said, but his tone was as hard as his face. I'd rather know what you're thinking, even if what you're thinking is insane. So I'm wrong again? I challenged. That's not what I'm referring to. It doesn't matter, he quoted, gritting his teeth together. I'm right? I gasped. Does it matter? I took a deep breath. Not really, I paused. But I am curious. My voice, at least, was composed. He was suddenly resigned. What are you curious about? How old are you? 17, he answered promptly. And how long have you been 17? His lips twitched as he stared at the road. A while, he admitted at last. Okay. I smiled, pleased that he was still being honest with me. He stared down at me with watchful eyes, much as he had before, when he was worried I would go into shock. I smiled wider in encouragement, and he frowned. Don't laugh. But how come you can come out during the daytime? He laughed anyway. Myth? Burned by the sun? Myth. Sleeping in coffins? Myth. He hesitated for a moment, and a peculiar tone entered his voice. I can't sleep. It took me a minute to absorb that. At all? Never, he said, his voice nearly inaudible. He turned to look at me with a wistful expression. The golden eyes held mine, and I lost my train of thought. I stared at him until he looked away. You haven't asked me the most important question yet. His voice was hard now, and when he looked at me again, his eyes were cold. I blinked, still dazed. Which one is that? You aren't concerned about my diet? He asked sarcastically. Oh, I murmured. That. Yes, that. His voice was bleak. Don't you want to know if I drink blood? I flinched. Well, Jacob said something about that. What did Jacob say? He asked flatly. He said you didn't hunt people. He said your family wasn't supposed to be dangerous because you only hunted animals. He said we weren't dangerous. His voice was deeply skeptical. Not exactly. He said you weren't supposed to be dangerous, but the Quileute still didn't want you on their land just in case. He looked forward, but I couldn't tell if he was watching the road or not. So, was he right about not hunting people? I tried to keep my voice as even as possible. The Quileutes have a long memory, he whispered. I took it as a confirmation. Don't let that make you complacent, though, he warned me. They're right to keep their distance from us. We are still dangerous. I don't understand. We try, he explained slowly. We're usually very good at what we do. Sometimes we make mistakes. Me, for example, allowing myself to be alone with you. This is a mistake? I heard the sadness in my voice, but I didn't know if he could as well. A very dangerous one, he murmured. We were both silent again. I watched the headlights twist with the curves of the road. They moved too fast. It didn't look real. It looked like a video game. I was aware of the time slipping away so quickly, like the black road beneath us, and I was hideously afraid that I would never have another chance to be with him like this again. Openly, the walls between us gone for once. His words hinted at an end, and I recoiled from the idea. I couldn't waste 1 minute I had with him. Tell me more, I asked desperately, not caring what he said, just so I could hear his voice again. He looked at me quickly, startled by the change in my tone. What do you mean you want to know? What more do you want to know? Tell me why you hunt animals instead of people, I suggested, my voice still tinged with desperation. I realized my eyes were wet and I fought against the grief that was trying to overpower me. I don't want to be a monster. His voice was very low. The animals aren't enough? He paused. I can't be sure, of course, but I'd compare it to living on tofu and soy milk. We call ourselves vegetarians, our little inside joke. It doesn't completely satiate the hunger, or rather thirst, but it keeps us strong enough to resist. Most of the time. His tone turned ominous. Sometimes it's more difficult than others. Is it very difficult for you now? I asked. He sighed. Yes, but you're not hungry now, I said confidently, stating, not asking. Why do you think that? Your eyes. I told you I had a theory. I've noticed that people, men in particular, are crabbier when they're hungry. He chuckled. You are observant, aren't you? I didn't answer. I just listened to the sound of his laugh, committing it to memory. Were you hunting this weekend with Emmett? I asked when it was quiet again. Yes. He paused for a second as if deciding whether or not to say something. I didn't want to leave, but it was necessary. It's a bit easier to be around you when I'm not thirsty. Why didn't you want to leave? It makes me anxious to be away from you. His eyes were gentle but intense, and they seemed to be making my bones turn soft. I wasn't joking when I asked you to try not to fall in the ocean or get run over last Thursday. I was distracted all weekend worrying about you. And after what happened tonight, I'm surprised that you didn't make it through the whole weekend unscathed. He shook his head and then seemed to remember something. Well, not totally unscathed. What? Your hands, he reminded me. I looked down at my palms, at the almost healed scrapes across the heels of my hands. His eyes missed nothing. I fell. I sighed. That's what I thought. His lips curved up at the corners. I suppose being you, it could have been much worse, and that possibility tormented me the entire time I was away. It was a very long 3 days. I really got on Emmett's nerves. He smiled ruefully at me. 3 days? Didn't you just get back today? No, we got back Sunday. Then why weren't any of you in school? I was frustrated, almost angry, as I thought of how much disappointment I had suffered because of his absence. Well, you asked if the sun hurt me, and it doesn't. But I can't go out in the sunlight, at least not where anyone can see. Why? I'll show you sometime, he promised. I thought about it for a moment. You might have called me, I decided. He was puzzled. But I knew you were safe. But I didn't know where you were. I hesitated, dropping my eyes. What? His velvety voice was compelling. I didn't like it. Not seeing you. It makes me anxious too. I blushed to be saying this out loud. He was quiet. I glanced up, apprehensive, and saw his eyes and saw his expression was pained. "Ah," he groaned. "This is wrong." I couldn't understand his response. "What did I say? Don't you see, Bella? It's one thing for me to make myself miserable, but a wholly other thing for you to be so involved." He turned his anguished eyes to the road, his words flowing almost too fast for me to understand. "I don't want to hear that you feel that way." His voice was low but urgent. His words cut me. "It's wrong. It's not safe. I'm dangerous, Bella. Please grasp that." "No!" I tried very hard not to look like a sulky child. "I'm serious," he growled. "So am I. I told you. It doesn't matter what you are. It's too late." His voice whipped out low and harsh. "Never say that." I bit my lip and was glad he couldn't know how much that hurt. I stared out at the road. We must be close now. He was driving much too fast. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice still raw. I just shook my head, not sure if I could speak. I could feel his gaze on my face, but I kept my eyes forward. "Are you crying?" He sounded appalled. I hadn't realized the moisture in my eyes had brimmed over. I quickly rubbed my hand across my cheek, and sure enough, traitor tears were there, betraying me. "No," I said, but my voice cracked. I saw him reach toward me hesitantly with his right hand, but then he stopped and placed it slowly back on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry." His voice burned with regret. I knew he wasn't just apologizing for the words that had upset me. "Tell me something," he asked. The darkness slipped by us in silence. "Tell me something," he asked after another minute, and I could hear him struggle to use a lighter tone. "Yes? What were you thinking tonight, just before I came around the corner? I couldn't understand your expression. You didn't look that scared. You looked like you were concentrating very hard on something." "I was trying to remember how to incapacitate an attacker. Self-defense. I was going to smash his nose into his brain." I thought of the dark-haired man with a surge of hate. "You were going to fight them?" This upset him. "Didn't you think about running?" "I fall down a lot when I run," I admitted. "What about screaming for help?" "I was getting to that part." He shook his head. "You were right. I'm definitely fighting fate trying to keep you alive." I sighed. We were slowing, passing into the boundaries of Forks. It had taken less than 20 minutes. "Will I see you tomorrow?" I demanded. "Yes, I have a paper due too." He smiled. "I'll save you a seat at lunch." It was silly, after everything we'd been through tonight, how that little promise sent flutters through my stomach and made me unable to speak. We were in front of Charlie's house. The lights were on, my truck in its place, everything utterly normal. It was like waking from a dream. He stopped the car, but I didn't move. "Do you promise to be there tomorrow?" "I promise." I considered that for a moment, then nodded. I pulled his jacket off, taking one last whiff. "You can keep it." "You don't have a jacket for tomorrow," he reminded me. I handed it back to him. "I don't want to have to explain to Charlie." "Oh, right," he grinned. I hesitated, my hand on the door handle, trying to prolong the moment. "Bella?" he asked in a different tone, serious but hesitant. "Yes?" I turned back to him too eagerly. "Will you promise me something?" "Yes," I said, and instantly I regretted my unconditional agreement. What if he asked me to stay away from him? I couldn't keep that promise. "Don't go into the woods alone." I stared at him in blank confusion. "Why?" He frowned, and his eyes were tight as he stared past me out the window. "I'm not always the most dangerous thing out there. Let's leave it at that." I shuddered slightly at the sudden bleakness in his voice, but I was relieved. This, at least, was an easy promise to honor. "Whatever you say, I'll see you tomorrow," he sighed, and I knew he wanted me to leave now. "Tomorrow, then." I opened the door unwillingly. "Bella?" He turned, and he was leaning toward me, his pale, glorious face just inches from mine. My heart stopped beating. "Sleep well," he said. His breath blew in my face, stunning me. It was the same exquisite scent that clung to his jacket, but in a more concentrated form. I blinked, thoroughly dazed. He leaned away. I was unable to move until my brain had somewhat unscrambled itself. Then I stepped out of the car awkwardly, having to use the frame for support. I thought I heard him chuckle, but the sound was too quiet for me to be certain. He waited till I had stumbled to the front door, and then I heard his engine quietly rev. I turned to watch the silver car disappear around the corner. I realized it was very cold. I reached for the key mechanically, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Charlie called from the living room. "Bella?" "Yeah, Dad, it's me." I walked in to see him. He was watching a baseball game. "You're home early." "Am I?" I was surprised. It's not even 8 yet, he told me. Did you girls have fun? Yeah, it was lots of fun. My head was spinning as I tried to remember all the way back to the girls' night out I had planned. They both found dresses. Are you all right? I'm just tired. I did a lot of walking. Well, maybe you should go lie down. He sounded concerned. I wondered what my face looked like. I'm just going to call Jessica first. Weren't you just with her? He asked, surprised. Yes, but I left my jacket in her car. I want to make sure she brings it tomorrow. Well, give her a chance to get home first. Right, I agreed. I went to the kitchen and fell exhausted into a chair. I was really feeling dizzy now. I wondered if I was going to go into shock after all. Get a grip, I told myself. The phone rang suddenly, startling me. I yanked it off the hook. Hello? I asked breathlessly. Bella? Hey, Jess, I was just going to call you. You made it home? Her voice was relieved and surprised. Yes, I left your jacket in your car. Could you bring it to me tomorrow? Sure, but tell me what happened, she demanded. Tomorrow, in Trig, okay? She caught on quickly. Oh, is your dad there? Yes, that's right. Okay, I'll call you tomorrow then. Bye! I could hear the impatience in her voice. Bye, Jess. I walked up the stairs slowly, a heavy stupor clouding my mind. I went through the motions of getting ready for bed without paying any attention to what I was doing. It wasn't until I was in the shower, the water too hot burning my skin, that I realized I was freezing. I shuddered violently for several minutes before the steaming spray could finally relax my rigid muscles. Then I stood in the shower, too tired to move, until the hot water began to run out. I stumbled out, wrapping myself securely in a towel, trying to hold the heat from the water in so the aching shivers wouldn't return. I dressed for bed swiftly and climbed under my quilt, curling into a ball, hugging myself to keep warm. A few small shudders trembled through me. My mind still swirled dizzily, full of images I couldn't understand and some I fought to repress. Nothing seemed clear at first, but as I fell gradually closer to unconsciousness, a few certainties became evident. About 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I didn't know how potent that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. Oh, yes! Yes! Oh my god! That was quoted from the movie! Oh god! Oh man, this was a good one too. Like, this was so much better in the book, I feel like, compared to the movie. And let me explain why. Because in the movie, yes, it shows them like in the forest alone and she shares her theory with him. But I personally like them in the car together better than in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the freaking school day. Like, what the hell were the writers of the script thinking? Oh, middle of the school day, they're gonna escape to the forest and, like, do the sunlight thing right then and there. Like, I feel like that rushed it so much, and I wish that they didn't just, like, rush to that part. You know what I mean? That's, like, one of the things I feel like the movie really, really, like, missed out on. They didn't really build up too much. I feel like this builds it up a lot more, because at least in the book, they spend like a whole other week, like truly taking the time together. And I feel like the book just paced things out a little bit better than how Catherine Hardwicke's Twilight movie did. So that's like one of the things I love about this chapter, is that it really, really does like sort of begin pacing out their relationship a lot more. And Edward basically telling her, like, this is something here that really, really, really like gets me here. Where he basically like hurts her, you know, emotionally, like telling her, you know, it's wrong, it's not safe, I'm dangerous, Bella. Like, please grasp that I am not good for you to be around. I am not good for you to be around. You shouldn't be with me. You're not good for me. I'm just not good for you. Like, we have to stay away from each other. But Bella, of course, she doesn't care, because she already feels something for him. Edward feels something for her. But the problem is that Edward knows that the temptation is too strong. He thoroughly understands that he is not good for her to be around, and she is not good for him to be around, and vice versa. So, like, Bella, of course, is mistaking that as, like, him not wanting her. But that's the sad part, is that Edward, like, she doesn't even know how badly he wants her so badly. Like, she just doesn't get how badly she's so desirable to him in that sense, because nobody ever wanted her. Like, that's the thing, is that Bella, for so many years, like, viewed herself as unwanted, undeserving of anybody's attention. Like, she, as a result, I think, pushed a lot of people away because she was such a social pariah that she just never saw herself as being worthy of being loved, of having somebody take care of her. Like, she spent her entire life taking care of her mother, not relating well to any of her peers, not having friends, not having anything. She thinks that she's completely unworthy of anything, like, good in her life, basically. She doesn't know her own worth to save her life. And the fact that Edward is, like, flat out telling her, it's wrong, it's not safe, I'm dangerous, you have to stay away from me, I'm not good for you, she's mistaking that as not being good enough for someone like him, who is so perfect, so handsome looking. And, like, and New Moon definitely does scratch the surface with that, where she basically does tell him, you know, it never made sense for you to love me at all whatsoever. It never made sense for you to ever show any interest in me at all whatsoever, because I will never be good enough for you. But that's the thing, is that Edward beats himself up just as much as she does, thinking that he will never be good enough for someone like her, because in her, he sees all the good in her. He only sees the good, and he refuses to, like, see anything but the good. Like, he sees in her selflessness, her kindness, her level of compassion, how she's able to just see past every single bad thing about him and only see the good in him. That's, like, something that they both share in common in their relationship, is that they hardly see the bad in each other at all whatsoever. Like, Bella, you know, she's not concerned about him being a monster. The only thing that scares her is losing him, and the only thing that scares Edward is losing her, because they both complete each other in a way, and they don't even realize just how much they complete each other until this chapter. And oh my god, wow. Like, I could spend the entire time dissecting this whole conversation between the two of them, but basically, that's, like, the entire thing, is them basically realizing that they're in love, and they cannot stand the thought of being away from each other for even 1 second. And, oh man, like, some might even say that their obsession with each other is not healthy. Like, I think they both admit how unhealthy it is for them to be so, like, obsessed with each other in that way, and, like, so attached. But like, each moment that they spend apart is proven to not be good for either one of them. And this is further shown in New Moon. It's going to be further shown how bad it is when they're apart. And, like, I get that many critics of the Twilight books criticize that. They say that that's completely unhealthy, that they're over-dependent of each other. But it's like, look at how dependent Rosalie and Emmett are of each other, how dependent Jasper and Alice are of each other, how dependent Carlisle and Esme are of each other. Like, the other 3 vampire couples, they found their mates, basically, their true mates. And in this case, Bella really is Edward's mate that he's been looking for God only knows how long. And Bella didn't even realize that he was really what she was looking for the entire time. She was looking secretly for somebody to, you know, just take care of her and let her, you know, just be relaxed, probably for the first time in her life, because she spent her entire life worrying over Renee, worrying over Charlie, worrying about everybody else's happiness, everybody else's needs, except for her own. She never, ever, ever put herself first, and she never allowed herself to love anybody. She never allowed herself to form connections with anyone, and this is the first time in her life where she's getting the chance to do that. And this chapter really, really does begin to scratch the surface of that. It really shows how the two of them apart, like, it's worse for them to be apart from each other than when they're together. You know what I mean? It's like they can't stand the idea of being apart like that. But at the same time, like, I also kind of get how it can be frustrating. I get it, because sometimes I do wish that she was a little bit dependent, like a little bit more independent of him. Just because, you know, she shouldn't need Edward to tell her story. And that is something that I do agree with. I do not think, I think that the minute a female character needs a man or any love interest at all whatsoever to basically tell her story, you know, like, I'm mixed on that, because clearly in this case, she and Edward complete each other in a way, and she's a relatively well-rounded character. Like, I don't think that she's necessarily flat and boring. She definitely shows different character traits that really make her stand out, in the sense that she is brave, she is selfless, but it's like, what is she looking for? She's looking for that very thing that's going to make her feel safe and complete and whole, and Edward is that thing for her. But at the same time, it's like, who is she without him? Like, but I think I figured that out. Who is Bella without Edward? She is the person taking care of everybody else, but never herself. And when she meets Edward, it's like, finally, she found that one person that cares enough to, you know, give a damn about her. Like, I'm not saying Charlie doesn't care, because obviously he cared enough to, like, put like snow chains on her tires and everything to make sure that she was safe before driving in the snow and everything like that. Like, Charlie clearly was the better parent than Renee was, but at the same time, it's like Charlie's love for his daughter, like, he never really much, like, parented her, in a sense. Like, his parenting in this book, it shows a level of, like, it just being surface level stuff, like material things. But I know that it's gonna grow kind of beyond that, but at the same time, it's like, with Charlie, it's just, you never, I mean, by the time Eclipse rolls around, you're gonna see that he doesn't really respect her personal decision to stay with Edward and everything, but we're not even there yet. We're not there yet at all. But I'm not suggesting that Charlie is a bad father or anything like that. Like, he's not a bad dad at all whatsoever. But I'm just saying that he never really knew how to parent her at all whatsoever. It was always Bella kind of, like, taking care of him, in a sense, that even, like, the little things that he did to, like, try to take care of her, she just didn't know how to respond to it, because she doesn't know how to respond to someone taking care of her, because it's always her taking care of everybody else. But nobody once bothered to really kind of take care of her in that sense. And you know, Edward was really, really the first person to, like, to go on the limb to protect her and keep her safe, in a sense. So if you truly think about it, Edward really was the first individual to make her feel, like, truly taken care of and looked out for in the way that she truly needed. And he was the first, like, person to truly love her for who she was. Because do you think Mike Newton and and Eric Yorkie or any of those guys in this book, especially Tyler Crowley, do you think they really give a shit about who she is as an individual? I don't think so. They literally just see her as something new and interesting to look at. But the minute that she falls into any kind of depression or anything, they're no longer interested in her at all whatsoever. They only hold interest in her for material reasons, for the most superficial of reasoning ever. And Edward is the first person to really sort of look beyond that and really see her for who she is as a person, and not based off of everybody else's perceptions of her, and really taking the time to truly get to know her, and not just, you know, going out of his own way to want her for physical, shallow, superficial reasoning at all whatsoever. So ultimately, right now, do I see Edward as like the best choice for her? Absolutely 1000%. Even though, like, I know we're gonna get into the rest of the conversation, but at the same time, like, Bella, you know, she's a freaking freak. I think that's pretty much explained here in the fact that Edward can't read her mind at all whatsoever. So, yes, Bella, you're a freak, and it's gonna come forth when you become a vampire. So, don't worry about it just yet. So, anyway, as you can imagine, I truly enjoyed that chapter. So, if you happen to be brand new, you can subscribe to the channel. And if you did like this video, you can leave a like on it and also comment down below in the comment section. So I'm going to continue tomorrow with chapter 10, which is called Interrogations. And this is truly, I would say, the halfway point in the story. So God bless. Happy viewing. Have a nice day. See ya.